What's happening?
Mr. Collins, how are we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much. Oh, how's your morning going?
It's going well. It's going well. Just slept in a little. In a big couple weeks with the summit and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. So what's going on with that? Because I've seen like I was kind of jumping around on your different pages, and I was kind of intrigued. I was trying to explain actually to my girlfriend maybe about 15 minutes ago. She's like oh, who are you talking to today? Kind of thing. I'm like, well, he's kind of like a sugar addiction activist is the best way I could kind of like I
that's a
what would
good.
you how would you describe it?
I'm the sugar-free man. No, I come at sugar addiction from the science. I've interviewed 400 of the world's leading experts in the summits over 8 years, and 12 different events, and I raised a couple of sugar-free kids 35 years ago. They're probably older than you. And I've just, it's been kind of my hobby for many years. And I opened Sugar Addiction 2009. And now the science in the last 2 or 3 years has proven unequivocally that sugar is as addictive as alcohol or drugs. So it's been it, right time, right place. But I don't know how it kind of got in my head that that was what I was going to specialize in. But
Yeah, I was good. That was going to be my first question is like how did you stumble into this? Like how did this become your thing? Like how did this become your passion?
yeah, I got sober. It'll be 40 years ago, a few days. And I read a book called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues was written by a guy named William Duffy. And Duffy was an interesting guy, but he ended up marrying Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And they promoted that book a lot in the 70s and 80s. And she was quite a character, Gloria Swanson. In her later years, she was kind of a health person. And anyway, I just kind of stuck, and I wanted to get healthy. So, I quit myself back then, and then I had the kids, and we didn't have the sugar. They didn't have the sugar. They didn't have sugar in the womb until they were 6 years old, and then they had it at a birthday party and some outside birthday parties, but never at home. But past that, I had a regular life. I mean, I had a job and career and stuff, and I opened Sugar Addiction in 2009, but I didn't really. The kids always said I should write a book, and I started one, but in 2016 I started doing the summits and interviewing all the world's leading experts. And in 2018, the book came out. And I was kind of semi-retired then, and I started working with people, coaching them after the book came out. And I started to grow meetings, online Zoom meetings every day. But then the pandemic hit, and it was just, I couldn't really believe it. Luckily, I was geared up. I had been in the internet world, my kids are in the internet world. Um, so I understood where I was and point in time, and all hell broke loose. It just like you saw the pictures in the stores of no sugar, no flour, no ice cream, no Coke, no cookies, no
No
everything,
eggs, no milk.
nothing. And
Yeah.
people were like buying up stuff and comfort eating at home, and they were gaining weight.
Hmm.
And the other perfect storm is right here on Zoom. Even grandma used Zoom. Like everybody understood this networking via, the computer and on Zoom. And so it just kind of exploded. And today we have um, five or more Zoom meetings every day of the week, support meetings. We have 25 coaches facilitating those meetings and helping coach people. We just got approved by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches as the first sugar addiction uh, group. And, somewhere during that time period, somebody called me the sugar-free man and it stuck. So that's the podcast version of how I got here. Short
I
version.
I love that, man. I had so many questions for you because we're like even just like when people think like, because I feel like if nobody's ever heard of this problem or thought of this problem, they're like, what are they even talking about? But when you think about like the leading causes of death are all like heart related issues, obesity, and then they talk about like even just like I don't even know if this is true. Maybe you probably know better about this, but I remember hearing like that cancer feeds off of sugar. And like that there's all these kind of studies relating to people that have just like kind of quit eating sugar, quit eating carbs, whatever it is. And I don't know where you stand on like what even constitutes like for sugar. Like, are we talking like bananas and oranges? Are we talking about mangoes? Are we talking about Skittles? Like, what are and so like people, I feel like it just seems so like asinine, or it almost like it doesn't really you get what I'm saying? Like it's kind of like it's like it seems like it's like almost a non-issue, and then you're like, wait, why are all these people dying of diseases that shouldn't exist?
Right. Yeah, that's a big question. Look, this has been an evolutionary process, I believe, and I'll start from the way, way top and right down to the Skittles. And at the end of the day, this is an evolutionary wrong turn, very similar to smoking tobacco that integrated its way into our society through no one's fault of anyone's fault. Like it wasn't the sugar producers. But right around the time of slavery, the growth of the sugar industry itself and Great Britain and rum and tobacco all exploded. And it just over the decades of, like I said, about 300 years, it evolved into our society as a common thing. I mean, you can give it to a baby and nobody's going to be upset with you. No one's going to be arresting you or anything in today's society currently. But, you also have to remember that they used to have doctors advertise for cigarettes on television.
Mhm.
And so the change is similar. And, as I step down from the large picture, in the last 3 to 5 years, the science around the brain science of what sugar is doing and what you mentioned, the cancer, the cancer stuff we've kind of known as far back as Warburg is the guy's name, but there's a brand new scientist at Harvard named Friedman. So anyway, that believe that yes, your answer to your question is sugar feeds cancer. But more importantly, I always separate these guys into the brain guys and the body guys. In other words, we've been studying the body's reaction to sugar for over 100 years. Diabetes, weight gain, they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3. It just
Mhm.
keeps going. But is what is less well known is this idea of the sugars affecting the brain, the frontal cortex, and there's a brand new specialization called metabolic psychiatry. And metabolic psychiatry is about how glucose spikes and ultra-processed carbs and sugar affect the brain. Food affects the brain, right? Both in depression and all, bipolar and just all kinds of depression, all kinds of stuff. But really, at the end of the day, what no one is studying is the addiction piece of the puzzle, where what you really want is a change. You want a behavioral change. You want to be able to stop using sugar. And people don't seem to be able to do that. You tell them to stop using broccoli, they can do it, or stop eating steak for a month, they can do it. But try and take away their sugar and they can't seem to accomplish the goal. And so what we've been doing is focusing on the brain illness, the frontal cortex, which is think hijacked. It's
Mhm.
literally hijacked. An important part of this whole thing is people we're finally understand scientifically that we're not looking for a sweet taste on our tongue. We are looking for a dopamine hit.
Oh
And
yeah, 100%.
right? And
100%.
so when I say dopamine, I mean dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptor. Every brain and body reward chemical in the is affected by sugar. And we just like we haven't put this two and two together societally. Like the scientists know about it, but like I said, you can give this to a baby and nobody's going to be upset. And so the world out
Unless
there,
it's honey. If you give a baby honey, people will get mad if they're
well,
like
it's,
under a year
honey,
old.
which the honey will bring us to this kind of, is it, your question, is it fruit? Is it Skittles? Is it whatever? And the important molecule in all of this, including the honey, is fructose. Fructose is a in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of the experts I've asked the question directly, fructose is a psychoactive drug. Okay. And the molecule in the fruit is and the honey is the same as it is in the table sugar molecule. Just like if you separate the table sugar molecule is half fructose and half glucose. But that fructose in the banana, the fructose in the honey is exactly the same. And there's been a lot of animal studies where it changes behavior. It brings on risky behavior. It creates
Mm.
foraging. It creates need for more food. And so it's a cheap calorie. And remember now, past about 1,000 years ago, we got fructose once or twice a year. That's it. We didn't get it like we do now, 24/7 drip. So anyway, it's a broad question. I can pick apart. I know I dumped a lot on you, but when you look at it, if you pull back and look at it over 300 or 400 years, and you look at it today with the science, and you start to pick apart the science, moreover, you start to pick apart the results. And the results are since the 1980s and the introduction of high fructose corn syrup into the diet, the obesity rate has gone up. And I hate when people say this, but when I was young, in a high school of 3,000, there was only one or two obese people.
Hmm.
Okay. And now it's one third of children or teens that are obese or overweight at least. And that's a result of the last 30 or 40 years of high fructose corn syrup and more sugar products and sugar drinks and such. So it's a big problem, but it really does fall squarely. The change process, the transformation process has to be separated from the diet industry, which believe most people come to me for weight loss originally. But the weight loss industry had said, eat less, exercise more, right?
Right.
But in reality, that doesn't work. It doesn't. People start to restrict the calories, and then they get emotional, they get weird, they don't understand why. And I can explain that, in about the arc of a podcast, to explain why that's happening and why people can't stop.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always been it's cool that you made the differentiation between the mind and the body because it's always been an obsession for me because of like the physical, like I was so afraid of like, okay, I don't want to get pre-diabetic or diabetic. I don't want to get obese. I grew up being a kind of a husky kid, and so I was like, I don't want to do that again. And
Mm.
then over the last like kind of maybe 5 years or 6 years or so after quitting like kind of drinking and partying and doing drugs, I noticed myself kind of gravitating more towards like, okay, I'm staying in, I'm not partying, all these things. And now it's like, oh, if I'm home from work and my girl's not home yet, then I want to have like a sugar, like a little granola bar or like a little like this or that. It's always like the best way I could always say it is like to just control how I feel in that moment. because the
Mhm.
dopamine rush that you're talking about, like it's always like whether you're talking about like porn addiction or weed or coke or anything like that, sugar, it's always like this need to control. Like I feel, this right now, and I want to change it right now.
Yeah,
Like you like for me, it was like drinking was like a delay. There was certain things where it was kind of like a delay of like if I do this right now, I have to wait like maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes. So
right,
those things never really got me addicted. The things that got me addicted were the things of like, no, I need this now. Like you said, like an IV, like instantaneous. Like, there's definitely substances out there where it's like there's no question. Like it's hitting you in seconds.
right.
And even that could be like porn or like anything like that. Like it's like the ability to just take my mind from where it is right now to somewhere else and not have to think about this right now, even if just for a second.
You're now like, look, I'm on a lot of recovery podcasts and a lot of like health and fitness podcasts. And the recovery folks at least have an inkling, and what you're describing is 110% true, that what's going on here is the ability to change how you feel. The one part of my story that I left out is that when my mother was 8 years old, my grandmother died, and it was terrible. She was, last person in the house. They had to move in with my great aunt, which she wasn't the nicest person in the world. And but across the street, they owned a country store. The family owned the country store. So my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim, who owned the store, that anytime my mom walked into that store, she could have any candy she wanted and just put it on his tab. And so that was wonderful to do for that child. But at the end of the day, my mother grew up and I believe died, not of Alzheimer's, but of sugar addiction, believing sugar was love, right? And that's how I grew up. Okay. And so I didn't understand then, and I know my mother never lived to understand it, is that sugar was changing my state a little bit. It was helping me self-soothe. And this is the important message of the whole podcast is that it was helping me self-soothe. My father was alcoholic and verbally and physically abusive, and there was chaos all the time. And my mother would feed us sugar and use it herself to numb out from some of this reality. You know what I mean? And as I grew, I didn't realize because it was always present and it was just something that was in the food system, in the family system. I was there. I realized that I didn't realize that it was changing my state. But at 13 or 14, I ran into beer. And I knew categorically that beer changed my state, how I felt, because I was kind of shy and I could talk to girls, drink behind the high school and go to the dance and talk to the girls, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, they used to call it liquid courage. You probably still do.
Oh yeah.
And so I, you know, fast forward, I got sober at 28, but like a lot of recovering people, I went right back to sugar
Mm.
and a lot of sugar. I wasn't eating any real food. 16-ounce Mountain Dews, which predated energy drinks as the highest caffeinated beverage on the market and the highest sugar beverage on the market. I was drinking like 6 or 8 of those a day, and I wasn't really eating like food. I was eating pizza and pasta and
Right.
candy and whatever. And so that, and in recovery, people didn't like, they used to call me the weird addiction specialist. The old timers would say, Mike, you sober today? And I'm like, yeah, well, and forget about the sugar, because they're over there with their coffee and they're putting like, 5 teaspoons of sugar in it. And there's cakes in the back and donuts and everything. And a lot of recovering people, because I'm open about my recovery, I attract a lot of recovering people. I attract a lot of people who 5 years, 10 years. My first coach was 20 years sober and our second coach and 20 years sober, right? And she had for 20 years, she wrestled with pre-diabetes and diabetes and, massive weight gain, all kind of diseases, and she couldn't figure it out, but she was sober. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, what happens is people realize, or starting to realize, that it's even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous twice that, sugar substituting sugar is a good thing. And it's just not, you know what I mean?
It's
It's
a
really,
good thing. It says it's a good thing.
it does. It says it will help your withdrawals. Pages 168 and 68, 9, I think, with bottom one, the top of the other. It's similar. It's about the same paragraph, but
Huh.
it's pretty amazing. And obviously you've seen them at meetings, but or seen the stuff at the meetings, but it's like now the science has caught up with all that, and it's not true anymore. And honestly, what I was, to finish this kind of people in recovery part of the story is that I've got hundreds, no, maybe 1,000, but hundreds of people who are in recovery in my programs. And to a man, to a woman, everyone said sugar was harder to quit than their drug of choice.
Oh, 100%.
And I
100%.
believe, right? And I believe because it's so ubiquitous, it's so free, no one even in recovery is worried about it or thinking about it or talking about it.
And it
And,
just seems sorry.
no, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it just seems like because the thing like I don't drink, my girl doesn't drink, and so like when we go like say like on like a Friday night or a Saturday night, we're gonna hang out. Like it seems like kind of like the thing that you can kind of like, oh, we'll grab a bag of chips, we'll grab like a bar of chocolate, we'll grab, and that's on a good day is just like one bag of chips and one bar of chocolate. You know what I mean? Like it's like it seems like such a like you said, like it seems I think you said it's so ubiquitous. Like it's like kind of it just sneaks in. Like and it seems like kind of a way to kind of be like a little bit naughty, but also like you're not really doing
That's
anything
right.
that's derailing your life. Like it's not making my life that unmanageable, as people would say. Like it seems as though. But then
Yeah.
you realize that for me at least, the way that I've seen it is like it's like slowly degrading my willpower, and then I also find it's just like, yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. Like, it's like, it always starts with like a little compromise. Like, I'll be able to eat like super well, super clean. And then it's like, oh, I forgot to meal prep today. So instead of like my like meat and vegetables kind of thing that I bring to work, it'll be like, oh, I'll just grab like a sandwich from the grocery store kind of thing. And then like, it's like, oh, like it's slowly from there. It's like, oh, I'll grab a muffin. Well, what's the muffin got in it? Chocolate. Like it's like all these. So it's like always. It seems like such like a slow process, but I guess any kind of addiction is like that, where it just kind of trickles in. But it's just such a sneaky one because it, like you said, like liquor here, like you got to show ID. You can't just go in and buy liquor. You got to show ID. You can't just like go into weed stores here and buy weed. Like they're gonna ask you for ID. Not anyone can just go in and get it. But I
Yeah.
could send like I remember being a little kid, um, and they used to have those like little 5-cent candies. Like they have like a little jar of candies, and you could put them in a little bag. And the guy at the store on the way home from school, like when you're walking with your buddies, like it's like all I needed was a quarter. I got 5 candies in my hand. Like that's a little hit, dude. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
100%. Absolutely. It's like even a child with no money can score it. It's not a barrier. There's no barrier to it. And again,
Yeah.
they realize scientifically, and every day a new study comes out about it. Especially that first 1,000 days with kids. I think it's criminal to, give sugar to kids, to children under 5 in the womb, even the mother eating it, because it's just, that brain development. They even have a big nonprofit now. First 1,000 days is like that brain development, that attraction to a substance for self-soothing. I want to keep hitting on that message because if people can get this part of it, then the the restriction of calories or the restriction of white processed carbohydrates of any kind that every diet book says is makes more sense. You know what I mean? It makes like this is why you're doing it. Obviously it works, but the reason you can't continue to do it is because you're not equating the use of ultra processed carbohydrates with self-soothing, right? You're not think of it like if you were, a drinker and you had a rough week and you needed a beer on Friday just to relax and numb out and chill out, that's a conscious decision. But sadly, in this society, eating sugar or 85% of products in the grocery store have sugar in them, right? The
Hmm.
cans and the bags and the boxes. So people are doing this light self-soothing with just savory regular food. And then obviously people that have bad habits are drinking soda and eating ice cream and cookies and stuff. And they are self-soothing in a deeper way. There's a kind of, I don't know, it's an industry really now called emotional eating and emotional eating recovery. And you know the term comfort food.
Hmm.
Emotional eating gurus, if you will, they get part of the equation right. They get like it is an emotional salve, an emotional a way to self-soothe, but they miss the important part. And this is true of the eating disorder world for binge eaters and bulimics. They miss this part of the equation too, that they believe, both groups believe that you should be able to eat a little sugar and a little flour, or you're not well. Like you don't graduate from treatment. And that's like wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. And
Yeah.
it's in its process. There are a few people who know both worlds, the eating disorder and addiction worlds. But biochem, I used to be the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute, and all the MDs and PhDs, and a lot of them I've interviewed now. Biochemically, about a third of people cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more sugar, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not bad. You have brown eyes, I have green eyes. It doesn't really matter. It's not something where, someone has dark skin and someone has light hair. It's like it just is. Like you're not going to try and change your eye color, your hair color, your skin color. And this biochemistry for about a third of people, and no one knows yet why. It's like drinking. Like some people can have half a glass of wine and never have think about it for another month.
Yeah.
Eh, But like the same thing applies to sugar. Okay. It's the same. Like,
Is there a
and
way to tell? Like you know how like they've I don't know if this is true or not, but it's something I heard, so I'll assume it's true. But I
yeah,
heard that like people further from the equator, like the colder the place that you live, the like the more alcohol your body can tolerate. That's why people in like Northern Ireland and places that are like super far up, they can tolerate like maybe like liquor better, like so like Northern Russians maybe. I don't know if there's like a truth behind that, or because it's just like what are you going to do? Like it's just so cold and you just sit inside, and that's just a theory, I guess maybe, but
it's a
I
good
guess
question. It's a good question. And here's what I believe, and just through the research and stuff, is that their only DNA change that we know of in the past 100,000 years is that Northern Europeans can ingest dairy, lactose, without lactose intolerance.
right.
Regarding the alcohol part, I believe that, you know, it's a family systems problem and a recovery problem. I believe sugar is the original gateway drug, and that, alcohol is straight sugar, and however much sugar you had in the womb and you grew up with is how, and this, there's a lot of science on this, that makes you more attracted and enable or unable to make the process of quitting sugar or quitting alcohol. And it's just an attraction more mentally than it is physically. So I think that, I'm not a big believer in the genetics of alcoholism. I believe it in the familial, the family systems, that you were trained this way with the sugar and then the alcohol as a result, which is my family and a lot of other families. So it's and they're kind of going around in the science. We don't have the diagnostic tools yet to answer your question
So
completely.
It's more
I
nurture than nature, then, is
I
what you're
believe
saying.
that. Yes, I really do, and it comes from the womb forward. Like my boys, look. I met my ex-wife in recovery, and we're both recovering, both families alcoholism, you know what I mean? I've never seen my boys intoxicated. They're twins. They're 35 years old. I've never seen them intoxicated, like at graduations, weddings. I've never seen them abuse because when they were young, from 0 to 6, they never were given sugar and got that adaptation that they knew it felt made them feel a little bit better unconsciously. So they're never really drawn to substances. It's not a thing for them, whereas for me it was, right? And so genetically we're obviously pretty similar, but really not familial. We didn't grow up the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously there's a name for that. For that's anecdotal is what it's called, but that's I've seen this over and over and over again with the people. We've done 40,000 sugar detoxes, and I get an intake, so I know what people's background is, right? And the same story keeps coming up.
Yeah. That kind of makes sense too, because it's just kind of like I feel like you said, you said it hijacks your prefrontal cortex, uh, but like it just kind of feels like to me like it kind of I guess it like hijacks your reward system. Like it's kind of like the first time, we could get a reward for nothing. Like you said, like at least like
That's right.
like it's like if you think like back in the as humans have kind of evolved on this earth, like there's always been like if you wanted to sleep with a woman, you had to court her, you had to do it wasn't like a instantaneous. If you wanted to eat, you had to go and get the food, you had to go and hunt or find food that was safe to eat. It was always like there was like a thing you had to do, and then you get a reward. and
Yes.
and even now, like it's like if you don't have a job, you don't have money, you're probably not going to score some booze, you're probably not going to. But even like the people, dude, this is a weird, sick kind of thing to say, but it's like even the people that have literally nothing, they're just sitting outside Walmart and shit. Like they have people coming out giving them cookies and granola bars and croissants and it's like, dude, anyone can get this sugar. Like
Yeah.
it's easier to get than I think any other fix.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, you're 100% right. Like you look at the diet of homeless people, and it's just sugar and coffee and soda and crap, and whether the two are related, I don't know. I do know, actually. I know in my heart, but it's hard to say.
It's yeah, it is hard to say, but I do agree with you. Like there's something behind. I just again, anecdotally, there's something behind it in myself where I know when I'm eating more like shit, like I'm just making worse decisions for myself. Like
Yeah.
whether it's like little small decisions of like, oh, I'm gonna stay up a little bit later and watch some TV. I'm gonna play some video games. I'm gonna fuck off from doing my emails and my, everything else I need to do. Like
Yep.
it like completely changes my neurochemistry that way, I feel like. And again, it's just anecdotal, but
No, it's so
you're the
true.
smart guy, not me.
No, no, it's so true. Look, back to your story about the evolutionary part of it. It's so like we call it here the difference between effort-based dopamine and substance-based dopamine.
Hmm.
We've been able to hack a system exactly what you described for food and sex, the reward for food and sex by sitting on the couch eating Oreos. It's like we get the reward for nothing. That's a great way to put it. We get the reward for nothing that was primarily created that there was a lot of precursor for the work. The work was before you get the reward, right? And also it's kind of a memory thing. Like, you can find the berry bush next year at harvest time, and you kind of remember that. That's why the food in the grocery store has sugar in it, because you remember it, not consciously. You don't say, well,
Oh,
that tomato sauce had this much sugar in it and I felt this much better. It's just like, oh, I'm craving that tomato sauce tonight for dinner. And that's that's the insidious part of it. I mean, they literally, I got a book over here called Hooked, right? They literally slide people in MRIs. They have campuses, genuine giant food campuses, and they slide people into MRIs and they put a little of the new product on their tongue and then look and see how the brain lights up. Like this is criminal, but it's insidious, but it's true,
Mhm.
true fact that sugar has been, and ultra processed carbohydrates have been, flour too, have been weaponized against the populace to sell more products. Okay. And look, at this juncture, like coming up 100 years ago, the Mars company or the M&M company, they didn't, this was not their part of their game plan. But what happened in the 80s is the cigarette companies were getting creamed by the attorneys generals, and like they were having to do something now, but they're sitting on this big pile of cash, and they start buying up the food companies and
I've heard
applying
about that. Yeah.
they start applying the same methods. Like there's sugar in cigarettes, inside of the cigarettes, and they're soaked in sugar, and they got sugar.
Are
So
you
you really,
serious?
yeah, yeah. And you're smoking cigarettes. So they've known this for a long time, right? And they started putting it in. Back then, again, I hate that saying, but it wasn't the number wasn't 80+% of the food products in the grocery store. So, it's like a lot lower. Only the things that were supposed to have sugar in it had sugar in it. Not
Hmm.
the ketchup and the tomato sauce and the this and the that, the beans and the whatever, corn, everything canned and bagged and boxed. And so this has been a slow progression that's kind of been under the radar, because this stuff looks like food, but it's really a lot of it's not. It's like food-like substances, um, and it's not what is it? It's not what's in the food or what the food is. It's how the food was prepared in the cans and the bags and the boxes or whatever. So it's a tough one for folks because of its ubiquity and because it's not yet recognized like a tobacco. Um, so yeah, it's hard for people to make the change.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you haven't made the same comparison that I hear everyone else talk about, which is like the way that like when they look at those brain maps, they're like, this is meth, like this is crack. And it's funny how you make the point so well without even using that kind of like I like I wouldn't even say hyperbole because like I'm sure you've seen the brain maps. Like it's literally identical. Is it not? Is that not true?
Well, no, it's 100% true, but here's the problem. Hopefully, it's a lot less now after Zuckerberg's announcement about the community, whatever the hell they're
The
doing,
community notes instead of the
the
fact
community.
checkers.
Exactly. So, like I did get an Instagram account whacked for saying something like that. And like they would whack you for putting that it's a rat study that cocaine, they're more attracted to sugar than they are cocaine. It's true. It's very true.
And more attracted to cocaine than food.
Yes, and more attracted to
So
cocaine.
more attracted to sugar than cocaine and more attracted to cocaine than food.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it's like, whether or not it's true in human, it's hard to judge, but it's a good representation of it, like the animals or what have you. And so, and also, hyperbole is probably a good word because, the reason I don't use that analogy, well, first of all, I used to get whacked stuff. I didn't want it, but, I didn't want to draw the ire of YouTube or whatever. But, um, you know, we've got to get people to understand that it's not, that it is dangerous. I, in my heart, believe that it is the true, as I mentioned earlier, gateway drug. It's really how people get started, but it's unconscious how they're getting started. The result is the same. And also, more importantly, there's a construct that the dose makes the poison, right? We take a little alcohol, we take a little heroin or cocaine, right? But we are pounding as a nation and a world average 20 teaspoons of sugar a day. That's not the people that come to me. That's
Yeah.
average. People that come to me are 30, 40, and 50 teaspoons of sugar a day. A Coca-Cola has 12. I mean, a 12 ounce.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so just imagine if somebody's got any habit at all, like let's see, I was drinking 16-ounce Mountain Dews, let's just say six. I can't even do the math. It's like 100 teaspoons of sugar a day I was drinking, and that's not
Yeah.
unusual.
Dude, even just that amount of liquid is like I'd have to consciously try. I don't even drink that much. Like I have like a cup of coffees and a cup of water.
Right,
Like I couldn't even drink that volume of liquid. The weird thing too is like I feel like I could pride myself sometimes in like that like the discipline level, like and like I can force myself to do the things like we were talking about like the earned happiness or I can't remember the term we were using, but I can do like the 10K run at 4 o'clock in the morning and then sit down and meditate and read and I can do all these things
right.
and then it's like it's not even mutually exclusive. Like it's like I could do all those things, have a perfect day at work a 12-hour day, like just completely crush it, feel like the king of the world, and then still I'll come home and I see like a little Rice Krispie treat on the table and I'm like I earned it. Like it just like
Yeah, yeah,
so like it's not even like mutually exclusive. Like I felt like before, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm like, if I can do all of these hard things and increase my willpower and increase my discipline, I'll be free. I could do anything.
yeah. It's
And it's
true.
like maybe I'll satisfy my dopamine system, like my with doing all of these things, like getting the endorphins from the run, with doing a successful job at work and having someone praise me, like all these earned reward systems and it's like maybe that'll satiate my craving enough and then you just see like the bag of lays on the counter or you like driving home and you see 7-Eleven, you're like I'll go grab a little Gatorade or something like that, like it's like you think you can just like train it away, I
Yeah.
feel like, but it's almost like yeah, it's like it's
What
not
you're
even
descri
mutually.
what you're describing is a little bit advanced construct in addiction recovery. And what it is that the payoff is always the shame. And the people don't really get this part of recovery. I don't, a lot of it's not mentioned much anymore. It used to be more, but um, you know, me personally, I have to be watched when things are going well. So when I have that day that you had, crushing it at work, doing my exercise, eating healthy, doing all that stuff, that gets me into a zone. Now I'm much better at it than I was years ago, and it keeps getting better. But you gotta bring yourself. It's almost like you have to bring yourself back to the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Mhm.
And what we know is shame and low self-esteem and beating ourselves up. That's one of the reasons we used alcohol and drugs so much, just to numb stuff like that. But that doesn't take away the fact that that's kind of was our baseline. And we try to get back to that baseline. And that's a big thing in my work. Like a lot of people say similar stuff, just everything's going great, but then I still and it does explain, I mean, it's a pathway to explain to people this phenomena. You've probably heard the research, 95% of all people lose any amount of weight, gain it all back in the first year, and then some. They add some. And this is easy to explain. So as we record this, it's January, and a lot of people do their resolutions, and the number one resolution is always weight loss. 85% of people originally come to me for weight loss. And so let's just say it's a woman and she's worked hard and she knows she has to restrict the white stuff, doesn't know anything about what we've been talking about today. But she knows excuse me, every diet book says that you should restrict the white stuff and the potatoes and the rice and the sugar and the flour. And so she does that and she's exercising. She's been exercising. So she has a replacement for the dopamine and she's doing well. You know what I mean? And then she gets to March or something and she's lost 20 pounds and she's at her sister's wedding and she says, I deserve this, piece of the wedding cake.
Hmm.
But that's really not what's happening. What's really happening is that she's at a family gathering and everybody's trying to play nicey nice, and everybody's got little conflicts that they're not going to air here, but they're under the surface when they see the sister or the brother or the cousin Jim or whatever. They see the stuff that they have a problem with, and what she's doing is soothing herself just a little bit with not consciously, like I need a glass of champagne, but unconsciously. And then she's back off to the races, right? And she's back to that place. She's back to that family of origin systems that she grew up in, where there was chaos, where there was conflict, where there was worry, where there was fear, because A, she broke her diet, but B, biochemically, she got like a whole day's blast of dopamine in 1 hour. And now she's a little depressed, a little blue. She's going to be a little blue the next day. So she's returning herself to that place, right? That annoying place she grew up with that sugar always solved. It was that connection that what she didn't raise to the conscious level with help of a group or help of a mentor or help of a sponsor or whatever. And that's why she fell back, not because she didn't have willpower, not because any other reason that she didn't completely raise out of the subconscious the reason she uses sugar. Again, not for sweet taste of the cake, but a dopamine hit and then a resulting crash, like every addiction.
Yeah, yeah. And is it possible? I don't know too much about like the entire brain chemistry process, but I've had this kind of experience, and this is again anecdotal, but like I've kind of had we had like a group chat going on for a while with the Risen Fallen, kind of like local people here, and we'd go for hikes and do certain things like that.
Yeah.
And just having the podcast in general, I have like a lot of people reach out to me because a lot of the things that I talk about are, like kind of the more meathead stuff of just like, yeah, you need to eat less garbage and fucking exercise more and, maybe put down your phone and pick up a book. Like get back to the roots of,
Right.
what makes human beings. Like how about just go like tell your mom you're sorry for being a dick and, love her a bit more. Like those kinds of practical things. And I've had people kind of reach out and say, for example, like, they're like, oh, I went for a run. It didn't make me feel good. I did this thing. It didn't make me feel good. And I've trying to kind of just been, I don't know if this is like an actual theory or it's proven, but like I've always said, like in my mind, like it's like you're probably fried your dopamine receptors. Like, of course, going for a run is not going to make you feel awesome because your brain is used to having fucking the you open up your phone and it's like the music that makes you feel good, the sights that make you feel good, the if you can look at anything you want, you can hear anything you want, it's got flashing lights, it's so visceral, it's so like, and
Yep.
so it's like what you think that like going for a run is going to top that, like you're
Yeah,
like
you're right. You're right on the verge of the definition or description of what's going on, and that's, scientifically absolutely correct. That's why dopamine detoxes are all the rage in Silicon Valley and beyond, is
right,
because, but here's the more important part, and it's, like I said, you're right there on the verge of it. There's not a ton of evidence that the dopamine receptors regenerate, the ones that you've fried, because you have fried them, that you thin them out. You have, it's called down regulated is the scientific term. You have less of them. But there's a lot of evidence that new ones regenerate. And so what you have to do is you have to, like, that old neural pathway of self-soothing has to be closed down. It's got to be cemented over. It's got to be done with. And you got to groove a new neural pathway to pleasure and
mm,
to dopamine baseline. And it's more important, this is a controversial a little bit, but I believe that it's more important that you build up your baseline dopamine, cold plunges, and all the stuff that you mentioned, runs and whatever, and those new neural pathways with, this is important, with sugar abstinence. Because if you're doing this work and then still using it, the old pathway's still open. It's still like you're shooting straight down it because that's what it's looking for. It's looking for sugar. But if you've closed it down via abstinence, then now you have this clean slate to open new dopamine pathways to build your baseline dopamine higher. And then the run will start to be, you'll get the whole runner's high thing again. You know what I mean? Which, that can be as problematic as sugar, but you understand what I'm saying. You don't want to overdo anything, but like the things that you mentioned, read a book is part of the dopamine detox. You can't have sugar or drugs or a device of any kind during a detox. And detoxes are helpful to get you kind of
Back
started
back to baseline kind of thing.
fast to baseline, but you need to, if whatever your drug of choice is, and sounds pretty logical, whatever your drugs of choice are, or processes, gambling or sex or whatever, it has to be eliminated. You have to have abstinence, or you're going to keep, grooving that one neural pathway deeper. And, it's like any addiction, it gets worse over time. So yeah, I mean, that's a good description of what you described. It's really you just have to start over. You have to start over with healthy things, healthy dopamine.
Right. And so, like, say, for example, like people are like, okay, I'm gonna do this whole sugar abstinence thing, right? Like what's I could kind of probably guess, but I'll ask the question anyways. What's your thought on like this whole like artificial sweetener business? Like, people are like, oh, I had zero sugar like French vanilla syrup in my fucking coffee. You know what I mean? Or like like nowadays, like I used to do like a little bit of bodybuilding in the gym. I was like obsessed with it when I was like 18, 19. And
Right.
so like I was always like there's these companies that seem like almost like fads. I'm sure you guys get them too around your area, but like locally you get like the sugar-free protein cookies and shit like that. Like it's like
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that? Like people are like, "Oh, I'm having zero sugar." Like I look on the back, it says zero sugar. So I'm
Yeah.
good, right? Right?
No.
Oh,
No. See, here's what happens. So the brain, which we thank you for, we've been discussing a lot of, and the taste buds. First of all, I want to say categorically on what I'm describing as a way to nourish yourself, there's nothing to sweeten. Like, we don't drink caffeine on my program, and I can tell you the story of the Olympian and how I came to that 7 years ago. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to sweeten. And the reason, and one of the most important parts is when the brain gets a sweet taste on the tongue, it's looking for the calories and it's looking for the sugar. It's looking for the second part of the equation. And the most important thing I say a lot, which I haven't said in this podcast, which I usually do, is that it keeps the cravings alive, as does fruit juice and heavy uses of high glycemic, high fructose fruit. It keeps the cravings, and who in hell's God's name wants to do this if you're craving? Who would want to be recovery from alcohol? Who would want to be recovery from sugar? If you're always thinking about it's got free rent in your head and you're craving sugar all the time.
it's like
And
smoke one cigarette a day. It's
yeah,
like,
exactly. Try that. See how that works out for you, or one beer a day. See how that works out for you. It's like you can't do it. The sugar is the same, and the sweet taste is the same, and it just keeps those cravings alive, and that's torture in my world. One of the common phrases we have around here is that 100% abstinence is a lot easier than 90% abstinence. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier because of that same fact, that same related fact of the sweet taste, you know.
mhm. And
Um,
so like like when you're saying all this, like so again, like kind of like as a like a practical thing, like I've explored tons of different diets, like you've said, like I've cut red meat for a while, I've cut dairy for a while, I've cut this, I've cut that, like I've gone through, I got a really irritable gut, so like I've kind of explored a lot of different things, and for a while. I went like it was like maybe 2 years ago when it became super like fatty. I jumped on the the carnivore diet for like 6 or 7 months.
Right.
And I was just eating basically like eggs and beef. Like that was pretty much it, and cheese. And the first like 2 3 months I felt okay, like it, like I kind of slowly adjusted, but then I started introducing fruits again, and I actually felt like kind of the best I ever felt was when I
Mm.
was just eating like basically like I'd have like an apple, orange, banana was like my combo throughout the day. I'd just always have them in my truck. I'm a carpenter, so like I'm always on the go.
Right.
And then I would just have like basically like if I couldn't afford steak all the time, it would just be like ground beef and cheese, like with like some salt, like that kind of thing. But like when you say zero sugar, are you so you're saying like that no fruit, no honey, no nothing, or like kind of explain like on a practical, if someone was listening to this right now and they're like, okay, I'm gonna make the change today, what
Mm.
should I do? What should I eat?
Oh, great question. So look, um, my diet change was similar to yours. I was vegan, vegetarian, for many years. And when I started doing the summits 8 years ago, I started listening to these guys. And at first I thought they were crazy. But now I'm probably 95% carnivore anyway. And it's really helped my mental state, a lot of physical stuff like adult acne and bleeding gums and basal cell carcinomas, like all of it went away after I got off of the grains and the fruits and that kind of stuff. And people always want to know what's the sugar-free man eat, like what's the diet? It's unlikely that someone's going to start today and go all the way to a kind of a stricter keto or a carnivore diet. Um, I have contemporaries who will not work with vegetarians. Like my first coach was a vegetarian. Um, and it's weird how this is my second coach was a recovering alcoholic, but and she's still successful today. And I was successful for 25 years on a vegetarian diet. But when I gave up the fruit juice and the fruit and the grains and the oats and all that kind of stuff, all these things cleared. Also, I was starting to have mental lapses. And both my parents were dying of Alzheimer's. So I didn't want to, I was scared. And when I gave up the grains and the fruits and stuff, all that went away, everything, including the mental or the cognitive stuff. And so the answer to your question is like we have something around here called borderline foods, and borderline foods are in four categories: nuts and nut butters, dairy, fruit and fruit juices, and dried fruit. You can take fruit juices and dried fruit off. You can't eat that and do this. Okay, you can eat a little bit of low glycemic berries and and like that, but that's about it. And dairy's the last one, or grains are the last one. I said dairy. So um, those four things start to bother people as they get off. My only job is to get you to see 90 day first job is to get you to see 90 days of abstinence from the drug foods, the flours and the sugars and the caffeines. If I can do that, then the possibility exists that one or more of the borderline foods will start to bother you. Like the fructose in nuts or nut butters, the concentration of the fructose is so gigantic that once you're off of ultra processed sugar, then the actual fructose in high glycemic fruit, dried fruit, nuts starts to, act just like the regular sugar, and you're craving it, and you're on your second bottle or second bag of cashews. And so you got to monitor that in the first year. You got to watch it. But it's a stair step recovery process where, first let's get you off the drug foods. So I call it powder addiction. Anything that's ever been reduced to a white powder has to go. And then, there's psychological and emotional, physical changes you'll go through. And as you heal and you get to day 60 or 90, maybe one or the other things that I mentioned in the borderline foods category will come up. And if it does, then, you have to assess whether or not it's creating enough cravings for regular sugar to knock you back. Plus, it's rent and free space in your head anyway, and you don't want to be obsessing about cashews. Cashews and pecans and I think almonds, they're not even fruits. They're called drupes. They're the seeds of fruits, which have been hybridized for fructose. So there's more fructose in them, and there takes the bitterness out, but it also creates just enough niggling. This is a long, weird story, but there's a thing on Netflix called Empire Chimp or Chimp Empire or something like that.
Hmm.
And the research about animals doing dangerous things to get to fructose is pretty well established. And I think in the second episode, the band from one territory has to get inside the territory of the main group to get to this tree that only blooms every 2 or 3 years. And it's very dangerous because they'll get killed. And one of the chimps did get killed trying to get to this fruit that was in that other territory. You know what I mean? And this, I know it sounds a little bit uh, removed from the human experience, but we have 98% of the same DNA. And fructose, once it's ingested, creates behavioral changes, right? And you've got to avoid it categorically at the beginning so that you can like move to the next level. And obviously, the answer is whole foods, the outside of the grocery store, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But just saying that to people without the delineation of the question you're asking is difficult. You know what I mean? It's like people are, they will drag you down for months saying, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Can I eat this? Can I eat that? And if we don't break that pattern for them and then start talking about what we've talked about for most of the podcast, the effects on the brain and the emotions, then they're not going to get well. You know what I mean? They're hiding, not hiding consciously, but they're hiding the actual behavioral transformation they need to live a life that's free, in a body that's normal size with no diabetes, in order to make that transformation, that behavioral transformation, we've got to move away from the food discussion, or they're never going to get there because they will, every diet book's got all these recipes and shakes and pills and blah, 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 blah. It all means nothing, if you don't focus on what we've been talking about mostly, which is the brain chemical reward systems.
Right, right. So it's less about like it's like oh, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Like can I eat some mangoes with some chia seed pudding? And it's like what's the
Yeah,
purpose? Like what are you actually doing this for? What are you substituting this for? Like is it because you
that's the
haven't
question you got to
eaten
ask. Yeah.
and you need energy, or is it because you like normally when you sit down you have a pint of ice cream and so you're just like, hey, it's not as bad, like, but it's like you're still satisfying the same neurological pathway. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. And you become more sensitive to it. In other words, once you're healed up from the sugar, then the fructose itself, or the glucose spike, it can be both or either. Like a glucose, you may not even eat any fructose, but you eat a big plate of pasta or a bunch of bread, and you get that glucose
Oh,
spike, right? And so the glucose spike in your brain, like the brain is an organ. Like yeah, you'll get fatty liver if you keep eating sugar or drinking alcohol. Well, the same thing applies. And if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor, then you can tell it helps, not mandatory, but it does help. That glucose spike goes into the brain and it causes inflammation in the brain. And this is what we're trying to heal mostly.
yeah. Well, that's the one thing I actually didn't even think about is like the actual physiological, like the inflammation of the brain. Like I always think when I think about it, I kind of think in this abstract term of like, what am I training my brain and body to do? That's what I always kind of think about.
Good point.
But I never actually think about the like the physiological, like the inflammation of the brain or yeah, like I don't even know if it's I've heard like the shrinking of the prefrontal cortex,
It
but
absolutely does, shrinks it. Yep.
and it's just I don't even think about that way, like the actual like physical implications. For me, it's always like this abstract world of like, yeah, like what am I training my brain and body to do? You know, like
Mm,
what am I don't know, like I've just kind of, and again, it's kind of from like experimenting with like different things of like fasting and non-fasting and doing this and doing that. And I just kind of always get like my thought process behind it is I definitely pay attention to the like, am I constant energy? Like, do I have this energy? Am I feeling low at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for no reason?
right.
As a young, healthy man in my 20s, like, it's like there's probably no reason I should feel really tired and need a nap at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So,
Right.
like, I'm always thinking in that abstract realm of like, I don't know if that makes sense. Do you get where I'm
Oh
coming from?
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that you're examining it at all is a big bonus. It's like most people don't think that far into it. You know what I mean? That which is part of their problem. And listening to a podcast like this, the only thing I ask for folks is just let the information light on you. Like you may not be, people ask me, Mike, what's your business model? I tell them I sort for people who are ready, and I can't make that, I can't peer into their mind and find out where they are, what they're ready for. And, um, it just has to be their own, like yours, your own thought process of where you've elevated your energy level, your sleep level, your food intake, exercise, where you have like fallen, where you're at, I gotta do an intake and figure out like where you're at with all that kind of stuff. And but yeah, you're right that someone healthy in their 20s and not drinking alcohol or using drugs is probably going to have a lot more energy than someone my age or what have you.
Yeah, yeah. It's how are you feeling about and I don't want to get like too political if you don't want to, but if you want to we can. But just like how do you feel about like this whole RFK Jr. getting involved and starting to attack these kind of they talk about like the red 40 and this chemical and that chemical. Do you think that it's kind of going in a do you think that consciousness of this kind of thing is rising and do you think it's going in a good direction or do you think that kind of these things like the red 40 and this chemical and skittles or whatever is kind of almost like a red herring? Do you get where I'm saying? Like it
Yeah, yeah, no,
could
it's a good question.
it's kind of like, hey, should we really be focusing on the red 40 or should we be focusing on the fact that 97% of what's available to buy is literally fucking poison? Like,
Well, it's so interesting. There was a discussion, I can't remember, I forget what they call the guy.
what does he
Uh,
look like? He's a Dr. Amen? That's the one everyone always talks about, I feel like.
no, it's not Amos, it's Jack Krug or something like that. And this woman doctor who's from Texas, can't remember her name either, but they were talking with Callie Means, who is an advisor to RFK, and I've had Callie's sister on our show, and we had Callie scheduled for the January event, but he got famous with RFK's move
Yeah.
to and kind of we couldn't get him back. But anyway, to answer your question, I do believe that if we can get RFK approved, I think that the direct for me personally, the direction that his belief system is similar to my own, and that Callie. The reason I brought up the discussion with Callie and those two docs is because Callie was hedging a little bit. Their big thing is the vaccine stuff, right?
Yeah.
And and he wanted to not go to talk about RFK's vaccine stance, right? But when you look at Casey and Callie's book, Good Energy, and you understand RFK's food and pharma stuff, then if they can blow up that system of the FDA being incestual with the food producers and the pharma producers, then I think we're doing, at least we're moving in the right direction. I think that's a, I think that's a positive. Again, and if he can do it, there's not very many presidents. I was a never Trumper before, and now it's like he's about the only one that could take the heat if RFK can get approved, the heat of the destruction, or it's not even destruction, it's the um how shall I put this? The disruption is a better word, the disruption of this, so that at least there's an awareness. Because right now, there's no awareness of the discussion you and I are having, or the discussion that Callie and Casey talk about in Good Energy or on Rogan there. There's just no awareness. It's very similar and parallel and included in the sugar discussion you and I are having. Like there's no awareness of the stuff that you and I have discussed for an hour. It's not there. And the stuff that they're throwing out, they may not be 100% right. They may not be, but at least they're going to raise the awareness. One of the things about the tobacco litigation of the attorneys generals, it was a decade-long, trillion-dollar advertising campaign that was free for the public, because basically what happened was every morning you would wake up to new lawsuits and things about, how bad cigarettes were. And when it started, or, in the beginning of the movement, 43% of the United States population smoked cigarettes. And now it's below 14%. And so that was a raging success for the raising of awareness, right? And if that, all I ask for people is to be the guide to, like I say, let the information light on you, raising the awareness and breaking the old paradigms that it's okay to give sugar to kids, that, all of that kind of stuff, to change all of that. And I think the disruption that it could cause is in the right direction. Like again, there a lot of the things. Oh, what I was going to say about Trump is he's about the only one that could take the heat of his Health and Human Services group making this kind of disruption.
Yeah, it seems like you're taking on the CIA at that point.
Exactly,
Like
exactly.
it's like that's where people get a bullet in the head is when you're costing people that much money.
Right, exactly. And and the political, like, the donors are all coming out now to try and stop RFK's um, nomination or whatever.
Mhm.
And because they've got a lot of money on the line.
Yeah.
And that's the same with sugar and pharma. Again, I want to be very clear, because I don't need any lawsuits myself, is that I have no gripe with the and food producers, because they were just maximizing shareholder value.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, now the science has proven very clearly that a lot of their products are danger, or, like, are becoming more understood, and their danger, both for addiction and for health and weight and diabetes and all that kind of stuff. And the public doesn't have the benefit of the science, and it doesn't have the benefit of the culture, meaning it doesn't have the, like, culturally, we're still in the dark ages around sugar. There's 98, I don't know, it's a wild ass guess, but 80%. I mean, I've had people come who don't know what a carb is, but so like 80% of people, like, they think it's sugar is fine, They just think it's like,
The
it's
food
just,
group.
it's willpower. Like you should just be able to do it. Like if quit if you don't like it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just not the case. It's just not the case.
Yeah. It is kind of it's something that it almost troubles me sometimes because like you said, like there's been all this awareness. Like we went through the DARE program where I live, like which is like the
Yeah, yeah.
drug and something, whatever. I can't remember
Drug
even what it was.
awareness resources.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Like, you go through these programs and then you kind of hear about like, oh, this amount of people used to smoke and now this amount of people do. And it always, especially here, like, because I'm in Canada, and so like we boast a lot about like our health care and how aware we are, and
Right.
this and that, and where I live specifically, Vancouver is a very kind of like it's a very hip and trendy like yoga Lululemon type city, and you get all these kind of, I guess I can only speak for myself, but it's like you kind of get this impression that we're going in this like healthier, we got a Whole Foods here, we got this, we got that, and we got there's a whatever gym you can go and join. You can jazzercise yourself to better health. And there's all these like, we're getting all these great progressive movements, but then you look like at the reality of like, okay, but these diseases are on the incline. And like you said, like you can look at pictures and like, dude, I'm like not even 30 years old yet, but like I've seen pictures of like beaches of like in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s. And you see there's like literally not a single like overweight person there. Like, or like you look at, even just the way that the media used to portray it, like there was usually like a one big guy. Like that was it. Like there was like the John Candies or like like the one big character. But like,
Yeah.
dude, if you were to put like an actual proportional representation, whatever they talk about, dude, every single show would just be like massive people. And you know what I mean? Like it's like kind of like
Yeah.
it's completely flip-flopped, and like it's something that kind of angers me because those kind of contradictions piss me off a lot. When someone is telling you one thing and then you're like, but my eyes see something completely different. Like, dude, like for example, like I've had to go for an MRI recently for my shoulder, and going into the hospital is like it's like holy shit, half these people are zombies, dude. Like and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to sound insensitive. I'm not trying to sound like a dick, but it's like infuriating because and like I've had people close to me in my life that are deeply impacted by like these types of illnesses, and it just I don't know, it just pisses me off so much. And it just kind of seems like we're sold this like thing of like, oh, we're so aware and we're so conscientious of this now,
Right.
but we're not. And even like I'm as guilty as anyone else. Like it said, like it's like, like I'm the kind of guy that is going to go for a run. Like, oh, you want to feel better about yourself? How about you fucking start to improve how you think about yourself? How you like all these different things. And I kind of explore that woo woo stuff, but even still to this day, it's like I still had some chocolate last night sitting and watching a movie with my girl.
Right.
Like all these little, and it seems like what's the word?
Innocuous. Right.
Yeah, it seems innocuous, but it's like these, you still wake up and you're like your tummy's a little bit upset. You don't want to go, like it's like, oh, maybe I won't go for the run today. Maybe I'll just go for the bike. And all these little chain reactions, it just kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of like I do delve into those like kind of conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And so I just kind of there's things that are a little bit too much for me. But one of the things I guess I'd just ask your opinion on this. One of the things I found out recently, I don't know if you heard of this book called Blitzed. There was like this book called Blitz. It's talking about how many people in Germany in like the 20s and 30s and 40s were all addicted to amphetamines, basically,
Yeah.
because it was easier to get than coffee. It was easier to get, like it was like the way that you could buy Tylenol. You could get like these amphetamines, like over the counter or whatever they call it, right? And
Yep.
so everyone in society is doing this, and whether it was intentional or not, essentially like it like made people more productive, more stupid, less likely to ask questions of what they're doing because they're just like you've seen probably amphetamine addicts before. They're the
Right.
ones taking apart clocks and putting them back together and shit like that. Like it's and for me, you have like kind of like this ADHD medication being prescribed to everybody. But then we were talking about earlier, like the sugar reacts the same way in the brain as amphetamines and all these different things. And so, like, my conspiracy theorist brain is going through all of these little thoughts of like, are they just purposely pumping us full of drugs and sugar to make us stupid and productive and like not fucking sleep properly, not fucking treat each other properly because we're so like designed or trained to go towards this instant gratification. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that there's like a purposeful, I know you kind of like are saying like it's not really the food producing companies, but like
Yeah, I
is
don't think
there
it, I
some
mean,
sort of
I don't think two people, three people, forget about it, four people is unheard of that can keep a secret of any kind. So I don't think there's any nefarious behind the scenes kind of there's no they. What it is it's very easy to build a business on an addictive product. Think Starbucks and think the amphetamine company in Germany. I mean, it's very easy to build a sugar producers. Now, do I believe that there's huge evidence at the library in University of San Francisco, uh, University of California, San Francisco, Dr. Kristen Kearns, who used to be a dentist. I'm pretty sure it was her that she runs it. I think it was her. She uncovered um, the records of an old sugar company and coming from the government and, back in the 60s or 50s or something, they had discovered that sugar was bad for you and they had a lot of papers on it. And then they paid some Harvard professors $60,000 to in that money. So who knows what it's worth today? Big money to cover this up, right? To write reports that it's not true. And those stories proliferate through history of cigarettes and everything. And so, do I think that there were business folks along the way that took advantage of that? Yeah, I do. There's no doubt in my mind. But I don't think that there's any like a cabal or conspiracy that where they're all working together. You know what I mean? I think they're all just trying to maximize shareholder value, or were and still are. And that's the problem with the Red 40 you talked about. It's like until they say it's bad, they're going to use it. You know what I mean? Until they get slapped on the wrist, they're going to push the boundaries. That's just the way it's going to happen. It's got to happen. That's the way they get paid and they get more stock and like that. They get more bigger paychecks. And, you know, there are turncoats. Casey Means is, or Callie Means is one of them. There are people who have like whistleblowers and told these stories and they've found things and they'll find more. And then back to our discussion about RFK and things like I'm hoping that type of awareness proliferates, that the truth of it. Like right now, like the reason you never hear stories about big pharma, bad stories about big pharma and all the stuff we're talking about, is because a full 50% of the news is paid for, sponsored by big pharma.
yeah, yeah.
The same thing on the other end with the kids. All the programming for the cartoons is paid for by the sugar producing cereal companies. And, so they're not going to like broadcast the bad reports so the public doesn't get to hear them. But if
Yeah.
you're like you and I, and you're researching and digging in and finding this stuff, it exists. I've lived in a little bit of bubble for the last 8 years because I've interviewed 400 of the world's leading experts, all like this. They're all understanding what you and I are discussing. They're deep in it. They're like, it's their life and their practice and their authors and their college work, their professors. And so I have a different view, but I also have to remember this is important. I have to reach people where they are. And if I get all the way to conspiratory theories and conspiracy theories, I'm going to be, I've had to straddle this world of what, and you have a podcast, is like the most valuable commodity on earth is attention. It's
Mhm.
bigger and better than money because you can't buy attention with money usually. Kylie Jenner proved it when she sold a company with five people in it for $1 billion. And,
Did she do that?
yeah, because she had 150 plus million subscribers. and she became their promoter as opposed to the person who's putting the cosmetics out.
Mm.
And that keeps, did Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn get Trump elected? Possibly, you know what I mean? It's the change in media, the change in awareness building and attention, the most valuable commodity on earth, that is, what I need to bring to the public. And I can't do it if I get canceled. I can't do it if I get, um, you know, way down the rabbit hole of what people are not comfortable with. It's been difficult. I'll tell you, the first struggle, and still a struggle, is the depth of understanding that I had to get to people that this is a real addiction. I hated even having to put the word real in front of it, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
why would I have to? Like, but I do still, because they say, well, it's not alcohol, it's not drugs, it's sugar. Every time I post something about this on sugar, somebody says something stupid like, well, just this morning, somebody said, you know, like sugar ain't shit compared to what I was addicted to.
Right.
But let me tell you, um, of the 1,000 recovering addicts in my programs, like I told you earlier, every single one of them said it harder to get off sugar than it was to get off injectables, heroin, drugs, alcohol. It didn't matter. Sugar was harder for them.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the death of a thousand cuts. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like, like if you overdose on heroin, you're like, that's very blatant,
Yeah.
and even if like, even if like it's not to that point yet, like if you're just like kind of like a habitual drinker type of thing, like it's easy to see how it deeply impacts your life when you
Yeah.
come home wasted and you argue with your fucking wife, or you're texting people shit that you shouldn't be texting them, or you're crashing your truck or getting a DUI or whatever it is. Like it's so easy to see the negative
Yeah.
impact. Whereas like the sugar thing is like the death of a thousand cuts. And they're like, oh, this ain't shit. But it's like, okay, you could say that, but like, look at these people that are making all these changes in their life. They're waking up on time, they're doing their exercise, they're eating this, they're doing this, and they're, fixing relationships in their life. They're like taking attention to all of these different things that we're told, if you do all of these things, you'll feel good. And then yet, there's these people that don't feel good. And so, like, you can say, I always kind of think about that. It's like me being like, oh, but like where you live right now isn't cold because it's cold out here. And you're like, okay, but if I fucking feel cold, that's still uncomfortable for me and it's something I have to address. So
Right.
like that's great that it's colder where you are, but that doesn't make my situation better. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can be grateful that like I'm not in a worse situation, but still want to improve my situation at the same time.
Right. Yeah. No, it's hard. I mean, there's a discrepancy, I guess, in knowledge, and um, there's a great futurist author. He's passed away now, William Gibson. He said, "The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And what that means simply is like there's a camp that knows the discussion that you and I are having. There are, whether or not it's all perfectly right or not, there is an opinion and a lot of success stories and a lot of science to back up the things that we're talking about. But it's not known well known yet, like the cigarette thing, where they had that $1 trillion advertising campaign that lasted a couple decade and a half, and resulted in the, basically the slam down of the tobacco industry. Like that, is that going to happen in the sugar and ultra processed carb? I do believe it. Yes, in my heart, and I think I'm going to be alive to see it. So I think that's important. But right now, that's not the general consensus with 90+% of the populace. Just not yet. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work ahead of us. One of my mentors, Dr. Lustig, who's, basically the de facto leader of all this, he, like in 11 or 12 or 13 or something, been 10 or 12 years now. He put out a boring college lecture on fructose, and it was 90 minutes long. And now it's at 121 million or 21 million views or something on, and he's written three books, and he's the de facto, because he's a doctor and professor emeritus from a university. And he's likes to get out there in the media. He's talking about the sugar more. But even the good doctor, which I love, the passion, he's my friend, but it's like he just recently kind of started to understand what you and I are talking about, which is the behavioral, um, the addiction piece of the puzzle, right? I mean, he did talk about the brain and the dopamine and all that stuff, but the I think it takes an addict to know an addict. You know what I mean? I think the deep, hardcore, like change process has to be guided by another addict, I believe. And it's the only thing that's ever worked in 12 step and now in treatment centers and what have you.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, I mean, I say that a lot on my podcast. If like your struggle is the biggest strength you have, like the things that you feel shame about are like the only thing that can connect you with other people most of the time. That's
Yeah.
kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah, they know your story, so they feel comfortable. And that's really what the magic is. People ask me, how do you do it? What's the success formula? And the success formula is peer recovery. People doing the same thing you're doing. They hear your story. Guy with 2 weeks can help a guy with 2 days. A guy with 2 years can help. Like that kind of helping process is how people get out of all this stuff. It's willing, if they're willing to, it's still in alcohol and drugs and definitely in sugar, you're bucking society a little bit. You've got to go against the grain a little bit. And the only way to go against the grain, because we're tribe animals and we like to be accepted and with our groups, is to join another group where it's cool to be no sugar, you know what I mean? Or it's cool to be no alcohol, whatever. Status is conferred by the time and the weight changes and the health changes in the new community. 80% of the 80% of my clients, what, 95, excuse me, 95% of my clients are women, but 85% of them don't have spousal support. Like the spouse is not on board with their diet and health changes.
Mm.
So you have to have another group, right? So you can't even be in your own home and have a support system. So it's hard, it's difficult.
Yeah, it is hard. I think yeah, that is some of the hardest stuff too, because it's almost like you want to look pretentious to a layman or like the average person. It's like, there's like the stigma around like, oh, you're saying no to a beer. Oh, this guy thinks he's better. Like imagine saying no to a brownie that someone just made. Like you look like I feel like a lot of the time, like that's how I feel like at family dinners where I'm like trying to say no to desserts because I'm like, look,
Yep.
like this is kind of something different. Like for you guys, I feel like it's like you can have like the one piece, but like I'm gonna go home and binge eat. Like there's a very different like kind of thing going on in my brain. And like that is one of the times where I feel like the world's biggest douche. Is like when I'm like someone's made something and I'm like, no, I can't have that. Like it's just I'm wired differently.
Right. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, I like to tell people that, well, you and I talked about it, like the food part is like, this is nothing. It's not a diet or exercise or food program. It's a codependency recovery program. It's a saying no program. It's a setting boundaries program. It's a sticking up for yourself program. Most of my clients are people pleasers. A lot of addicts are people pleasers in general. They've helped everyone. They feel guilty when they help themselves. And if they don't get away from the food understanding, just get the abstinence and then start working on these codependency issues, they always fall back. They always end up back where they started. And they don't understand it if they don't open their minds enough to get to the real recovery, which is Stop self-soothing with substances. Start self-soothing with yoga and walking and running and exercise and hugs and, and whatever it takes to stay abstinent. For my only job in life is to let someone see 90 days of abstinence. There's not a person on the planet that like has ever gone back. Not, I take it back. Like there's not a person that I've ever worked with that has ever gone back. Now they may slip, but they'll always come back. Once their body sees, their mind, excuse me, mind sees 90 days, they're done with that habit. Or put it to you this way, I sure ruined their sugar. I sure ruined their enjoyment of sugar. You know what I mean? Because they don't want to like they're just and when they go if they go back, sadly, and some do, but they always come back because they want what they had for those 90 days. At least for the last, 6 days, 60 to 90, they felt really good.
Yeah. I guess one of the last things I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of something that I've been thinking about just since we talked about it. Like I didn't know about your the way you raised your children, but that is kind of one of the things like I hear about a lot. Um, for example, there's like this whole TikTok ban going on, and I'm not even 100% sure where it's at because I try and stay tapped out of a lot of social media stuff. But essentially, like, there's like conversations, I'm sure you've seen it, where they're like, oh, this is the Chinese version algorithm or whatever. And it's like people playing like violin and achieving fucking scholastic awards. And then you see like our algorithms, and it's just like women shaking their asses, food, drugs, alcohol, partying.
Sure.
You need to make more money. You need to do this better. Like all these little things. And I've always kind of thought of it as like, I think that the algorithms are just kind of feeding what we're into. And I think that a lot of the time we look at, government regulations and to almost parent our children for us. And I can't really express this. I mean, I can, but I don't have kids, so it falls on deaf ears a lot of the time. But like, what's your take on this whole like, oh, like, because I all my buddies like I kind of like try not to say shit when I see my friends have kids and they're sitting there watching screens or eating shit that they shouldn't eat or doing this or doing that, throwing a temper tantrum and goes unchecked, like all these different things. I'm like, I don't know if that's the best thing. I don't know if that's but I just kind of zip my lip. But like,
Yeah,
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because you said you raise your kids without eating sugar for the first like 6 years of their lives or 5 years of their lives.
yeah,
And what's your kind of thought on this? Like, I'm sure you kind of fall obviously on the side of like it's a little bit maybe you should parent your own fucking kid as opposed to like waiting for the government to tell you they shouldn't be on TikTok or
right.
Facebook or whatever it is.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like, how do you navigate that kind of lifestyle? Like, obviously, like you just I'm conscientious about my choices. But like, how do you like? Obviously, 30 years ago, kids weren't sitting there with iPads. But I
right.
think that this like kind of thing of like the digital drug or the sugar drug or yeah, you obviously see the parallels in all of them, like I do.
Yeah,
And what are your thoughts on this, or what's your kind of like take or advice to people that are like, well, you don't understand how easy it is to just like give your kid the iPad and they stop screaming at you so you can go grocery shopping or have a
yeah,
phone call with your insurance adjuster, whatever it is.
yeah. No, I'm a big. So it may be one of my next communities. Addiction in general, alcohol, but definitely the screen addiction, phone addiction stuff is very problematic. And, I even have a Google alert on it because I want to know what's up there. And there's a lot of nonprofits forming, there's a lot of government things forming, again, it's the science part of it. There's a lot of science that shows the brain hijacking, and the earlier you hijack it, the worse it is. And it's the escape. I want to keep along the theme that you've been kind enough to allow the people to get, which is they are self-soothing. They're not like because of the stimulation they're getting these jacks of dopamine all the time. And that's really what the TikTok algorithm is about. It's about for you basically. It's not a social graph anymore. It's an interest graph. So whatever you're interested in is what they're going to keep feeding you, and you become just like I'm in a bubble of the sugar educators. People become in a bubble of horse racing, or they become in a bubble of if it's a kid, K-pop, whatever it is, whatever their thing is going to keep getting. So they're interested, so they keep getting these blasts of dopamine. And they've had all kind of stuff where and they're easier than food because food, it'll screw up the MRI. Where in the MRI they can actually look at the screen and not move, so they can watch their brain stuff, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's the science is a little easier to figure out, and it's very clear already that this is um, causing problems and behavioral problems, and like just try and take one away from a kid who's 2 or 3 who can't really articulate why he wants to keep it, and he loses his mind, just like the kids when the birthday party, when the cake and ice cream comes out of the birthday party, you see it very clearly, but you can't quite articulate what's happening, that they're all first hide behind their mother's leg, and then all of a sudden they're all crazed and
Yeah,
running around
the eyes
mad.
open up.
Yeah, their eyes are like opening up and they're all happy, and like, and then it goes through the inevitable crash. And so the thing about the screens and kids, I think maybe I was blessed that my kids were born in 1989, and they had 5 or 7 years, 6 years without really any of that. And then it was pretty scattered. I still had AOL dial-up in the 90s, even the late 90s, and fast internet didn't happen, whatever. So they were, what, 11, 10 or 11 before, all the dot-com crash. So I think they were, but I still think they probably have more of a screen attraction than a lot of, that was, but I feel really bad for the kids that are born today. And when I see a kid with one of those, iPads I was in the gym the other day. I was going to take the picture, but I was wondering if I could get in trouble. So the mother's working out, and there's 2 kids. One looked to be about 4 or 5, and the other looked to be about 2 or 3. And both have different. One had a complete iPad, or a complete MacBook Pro, and the other had a little mini, or and they're just engrossed, just like
Yeah.
glued to the thing, sitting on the floor against the wall, and just glued to the thing. And I don't think that there's too many things in a children's um, childhood or raising that is that attractive. And the only answer, now scientifically proven answer, is a dysregulation of the normal natural dopamine rhythms and how you are rewarded. Like you're not going to be rewarded for, exercise or good food or anything. You're going to be rewarded by that screen. And it's hard, man. I mean, I think I'm a television addict at some level because it was a good escape for me when there was chaos in the house. And when there was peace in the house, as a family, we all watched together. And
Mhm.
so I've got both sides of the equation. So I know that it's real, and it's so much. This is interesting, and it's interesting you're bringing this up, is that it's so much more um, scrutinized today than sugar is.
Mhm.
Like, just set yourself a Google alert for sugar and sugar addiction and sugar detox and screen addiction or phone addiction, and you will see it. It's like there's 10 or 12 stories every day about screen and phones, whereas there's 1 or 2 about the other two, you know? And so I don't know how we work ourselves out of this problem because I am a believer. You know who Gary Vaynerchuk is?
Yeah.
So I believe what Vaynerchuk believes, and that this shit ain't going away ever. And you know what they said to Henry Ford, if he'd have given them what they wanted, they want faster horses, and it changed society. And Elvis Presley, rock and roll was the destruction of children. And neither thing happened. And it's like this is the same thing. This is like electricity. Electricity will kill you if you use it wrong. And but it changed society, and this is already has changed society. And I'm ready. You've got to take your own control because there's going to be no government controls. I mean, there is already a movement. It's in New York State just 2 days ago. They eliminated phones for children. And so you can't have phones. I don't know how it's going to be enacted or how it's going to be, executed, but the governor's done with phones for kids. And so there's a lot of concern. You don't see them changing the diets, en masse like that. They just don't, it's not happening. And so I'm really interested in that field. I'm really interested in that movement. And hopefully I can, I think our model of behavioral change can work, but I've got to I got to kind of stick with this because I'm famous for shooting off in some other direction.
I,
But
I like that though. And like I said, like I think that you're kind of a good example of like this like not just like kind of lead by example and but it's I think so many times we're like kind of like reliant on like, oh, why does the government let these companies do this? And it's like, dude, you're the consumer.
right.
You're the consumer of this. It's not like the government's like, well, in some cases they are just giving them money, but it's like, yeah, no, this business survives because you're consuming it. Like you're the one that like, what are you waiting for fucking daddy to come and tell you to stop doing that?
Yeah, no, that whole like nanny state stuff, I agree with. It's like you've got to take responsibility for your own self and your own family. And,
Sorry for cursing too. I don't I never.
what's that?
So I started sorry for cursing so much today. Try
No,
not
I
to
don't
as
mind
much, but
cursing. I probably curse more than you, but I've had to learn to temper it because I don't know which podcast I can do it on.
oh yeah, you can go for it, dude. The thing is too is I'm not worried about like as you can see like kind of worried about that kind of stuff. Like I'm a carpenter. I do home renovations. This is my passion, not my job. So it gives me a bit more freedom.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it.
But yeah, it's just it seems like I like the fact that you kind of have that you're not afraid to raise your kids a certain way or speak a certain way or and you're not waiting for someone to tell you that like especially in the late like you said the late 80s early 90s like they would like you think there's like and I agree there's not a lot of awareness about like the sugar how much it's a poison for us physically and mentally but like in the 80s and 90s like
None.
I
Zero.
I was born in 95 and like I don't remember hearing about these types of things until probably 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I think I got lucky to be honest with you. I think recovery helped, or I was trying to get healthy after I got sober. But I think I got lucky, and I think the kids got lucky. My boys got lucky. It was a perfect storm. It's hard to look at it that getting sober is lucky, but I mean, I do believe that anyway. But
100%, yeah. It is cool to see that kind of yeah, and there was just like this so much shame around those two things. Like we kind of talked about screen time and it obviously does get a lot more awareness because I think that it's more obvious. You know, like when you get on a city bus or you go to the mall and you look around and you see like most people have their heads down, you're like, oh, this is troubling. You know, this is concerning.
I can't
But
even imagine what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years. I swear to God, everybody's going to look like this. Everybody's like you see a guy, an older guy or gal, and you see him like, and they got the neck thing, you know.
and you
This is
can see like their spine sticking through
yeah,
too.
yeah. It's like you're like, I mean, it, you're like, why don't they just stand up, or why don't they, you know, how did that happen? You know what I mean? But I can see it very clearly. I mean, it's already a huge problem, but like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it's going to be because everybody that's 40 or 50 has been on their phones. And this is when their nutrition's bad and it's just going to be weird. Like,
Hey, I got a question. Do you think that I know I gotta like in respect to your time, we'll probably wrap up pretty soon, but I was just gonna say, like, do you think that over generations and generations, for example, like people might be able to kind of adapt to because you know how you were talking about dopamine receptors, for example, right? And as you put in more input that will give you more dopamine, I guess your body kind of decides, hey, we don't need as many receptors because we have way more supply. I don't know if that's like the way that it works, but that's just how my brain wraps around it. But I guess do you think that people are going to kind of evolve to having this more caloric dense diet, maybe be able to um, become less insulin resistant, or what are your thoughts? Like, do you think that maybe like kind of like the Gary Vaynerchuk like example of like this shit ain't going nowhere? Do you think that we're just going to adapt to it, or do you think that we'll all just become diabetic, obese, and dumb and die?
wow, like that is the $64 million question right there is like um I think that the movement that I hopefully am at least a foot soldier in or participant in about metabolic health will, you never know when a tipping point is. You know what that is, right? Like you never know
Mm.
when like everybody says, "Oh, okay." And it's then it's common knowledge, it's accepted, it's actually status positive to not eat sugar and ultra processed carbs, then which I think is going to happen, like I said, in our lifetime because of the internet. Um, but I think that we're going to get a little worse before we get a little better. I'll put it
Yeah,
that way. I think there's going to be, you just don't know what the tipping point. And we talked about earlier, could RFK be the tipping point if he gets in? And Cal, nobody's mentioned what Callie's going to do or his sister Casey's going to do. Like if they become government operatives or you know, lightning rods for this. I think Callie's a little too serious and not quite as charismatic. He's charismatic, but he's not as serious. There needs to be a more of a leader, a little bit. There's a few now that are developing. They're kind of carnivores and um, there's fews, but there's not many. And so the answer is,
not
I
many that keep their shirt on their Instagram reels, that's for sure.
that yeah, I mean the ones that's a good, so true. That they can also
Thank you
uh,
for wearing a shirt today
yes, yes.
in
I'm
the
I'm
grocery store.
I'm built for a guy in his 60s, let me tell you that. So
No, I
anyway,
can tell. I could see. I could see.
and I wasn't able to do that on carbs, but I'm telling you, there is a definite difference. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is like I think we're going to get a little worse before we get a little better, and but I think the tipping point is coming. If Rob Lustig has anything to do with it, like I guess I can't tell you that he told me that in confidence, but well, I guess it's pretty obvious that he's not going to be part of the government. He's going to be continuing to, you know, beat the drum like I am. I'm not going anywhere. And so hopefully we can get a consensus that it's really the theme of the whole thing we've been talking about. We've got to raise the awareness. If people don't know, they're not going to do. Simple. They're not going to know that they're not supposed to give their kids sugar. 50 years from now, they're going to say, they used to give sugar to kids, right? It's
Yeah.
going to be an adult treat, not going to be illegal. Earlier, I thought it might be illegal. Dr. Lustig believes that you should have an ID. And I actually believe that right now. You should have to have an ID to get sugar. But I think it's going to be, an adult treat. Like it, like if a woman finds out she's pregnant, she can quit smoking that day. Like it's hard to quit smoking. And even with substance use disorder, if they have an alcohol problem or something, they can quit the day they walk out of the doctor's office. Done, you know. And I think that needs to happen with sugar. It's like it's pretty obvious now, and the science proves it. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the hardest thing for people to wrap their head around with it is like it's like you'll see people that kind of like look like you or I. They're like physically fit. They can continue a sentence without, stammering. They can have a conversation for a couple hours,
yeah,
and yet still like they'll die of this weird disease.
yeah,
And the hard thing about like sugar or anything else that these kind of chemicals in the foods or radiation or these kind of, well, I guess radiation's easy to pinpoint, but I guess what I'm trying to say is with sugar, you get like kind of Alzheimer's, you get like this or you get that or you get, and it's hard to pinpoint because a lot of people like me, like say I get like a disease that's directly linked to like sugar, people would
yeah,
be like, oh, but he works in construction. He's been inhaling paint fumes and fucking glue and all these different things. Like, it's so like it's like a stealth bomber, dude. Like you can't pinpoint the thing like, oh, this guy consumed 90 grams of sugar a day. You know?
yeah.
It's
No,
it's
you're
one of
right.
those sneaky
Absolutely.
little assassins.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, just 2 days ago, it's amazing. It's every day now. So a survey comes out that they had studied all of the children who were in sugar rationing in Great Britain during the war. So they're like 60, 70 years old, these people.
My grandma, what she's told me lots of stories of that, of how they had war rations and sugar rations and
Well, all of the people in that age group have like demonstratively and categorically less disease later in life.
you know what? It's funny too, because my grandma's a very hardy lady. She actually yeah, she's had cancer. She's had all these things. She's just so hardy, and she was one of those people. Like I remember, one of the things I remember about being a little kid is grandma going out and having a smoke on the back porch after dinner, kind of thing.
Yeah,
And once she got cancer, it was like, oh, I'm done with it. It wasn't even like a related. It was colon cancer. So it's like
yeah,
it's not even related really to smoking directly. Like kind of you could parse it out if you wanted to make that argument and be like, oh, well, it's not lung cancer, throat cancer, mouth cancer. But for her, it was just like, oh, I'm done poisoning myself every day. And
yeah,
I guess she's just like a hardy woman. That's what I think.
yeah.
It
It could
is
have
like,
been. Women of that age are like they didn't have like I didn't have that much sugar when we were young, as much as the kids do today. So that I think, to answer your previous question, like it's problematic and sadly, in a lot of ways, this is uh, socio demographic. It's socioeconomic in that like the poorer people are going to be the last to learn about it. They're living in food deserts to begin with. They
mhm.
think that the things in the grocery stores and boxes and bags and cans are food, and they're just not gonna, like the more wealthy people who are more, have more resources to buy better foods are going to make out better as the transition happens. It's already the case. It's already the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that a lot of it, like the same thing with the screens for kids. I think that a lot of the issues stem from like we're going to be killed by convenience. Like the convenient, like as someone that's like, hey, I got to make it to the gym by X time, and I'm driving home from a job site, and yeah, I have like a little bit of food ready at home, but then I have to cook it, and like, well, then I won't have to, there's all these kind of like rationalizations of like, oh, I just stop and grab this, so I'll just, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's just like those types of, you make that decision once a week, and then it becomes twice a week, and then it's like, oh, I'm grabbing my daily thing.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of the term, but it's very relative. It's, choose your hard. And a lot of people believe, and I do believe exactly what you're saying, is that it is the ease of getting comfort, and that somehow comfort and even security at some level, you have to have some security, but getting comfort and security is not guarantee of health. It's not a guarantee of self-actualization. It's not a guarantee, we were meant to have a level of effort required, like we talked about earlier, to have a reward. And that's just not the case. I mean, everything is so convenient. Take out food and DoorDash and all that kind of stuff. It's just, and it just it's not going to be, not,
Drive-throughs, dude. I don't even have to get out of my car to go
yeah,
into the store. Like I fucking just get
yep,
1,200 calories passed through my window.
yeah,
Hell yeah, like let's go.
exactly.
It is yeah, definitely like a killed by convenience type of thing.
Right.
All right, well, sir, like I said, out of respect to your time, I gotta say thank you very much for the last couple hours. I appreciate this, and yeah, one of the reasons when I first saw like kind of the email like of reaching out, like it was kind of one of those things where I've had that same experience of like I've quit doing drugs that I've quit drinking. I'd say I'm California sober, and I'm sure you kind of get what that means, but like it's kind of one of those things where I've been able to, parse out and quit every single thing I've ever been addicted to, but the sugar addiction thing is the one thing that is always nagging, like always, always, always. And the way that you explained it, like I've always said baked goods are my like breads and muffins and cookies, like baked goods. My mom baked a lot when I was a kid, and that's like the same thing. It's like, oh, it makes me feel like home. Like it
Yeah.
makes me feel like a warm hug,
Yep.
like you have a fresh bagel or
Yeah.
something like that. Like I'll
Sure.
jump all over it. And that it's such a it's more of an experience of just like kind of having that sweetness on your tongue. It's like
Right.
I want to feel good and comfortable right now,
Yeah.
like right now, and even like the anticipation of like getting it sometimes, just like
Yeah. Yeah.
holding it in your hand. You're like, whoa, look at this ice cream or look at this cookie. Like, yeah,
Get yourself a continuous glucose monitor. You'll see the monitor actually go up before you ingest it from the anticipation.
are
It'll
you
blow,
serious?
it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your
Your
mind.
blood sugar goes up
Your
just
blood
from
sugar
the
will go up
anticipation.
just from the anticipation. I've done it before.
Whoa.
I've seen it live, live on my phone from my, CGM.
Yeah, yeah. Even just talking about it, my heart rate just went up, I think.
Oh yeah, you think
Yeah. Yeah, that's
it is
that's
part of the dopamine response is the anticipatory binding and getting.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I could think of there's like a specific candy store in Vancouver here that I like. They make like these wicked crazy ice cream sandwiches and shit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think like just like literally driving there is more exciting than eating the thing.
Always, always. That's part of find the next berry bush, find the next herd of deer, as we evolved. That was it is part of the dopamine process. It's almost as rewarding as the actual event.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will keep going on forever. So, like I
No, I
said,
appreciate it. I've my summit interviews are about an hour, and I love the Rogan's format, and I think that things get fleshed out better in longer form stuff. So I appreciate it. It's been good.
Yeah, and sorry we didn't get to talk too much about the summit. I was actually curious about that and I wanted to ask you more
Well, the
about it, but I
summit's
don't know if you want
passed.
to.
You can still go to quitsugarsummit.com and put your name in. We have events all the time, so just check it out, and they'll see. They'll enjoy it.
Oh, hey, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. And
All right.
yeah, thank you. Is
Keep
there
up the
anything?
good work, man. You're doing a good job. I think people will, you'll be doing this full time if you keep after it.
Thank you very much. I
All right.
appreciate that. Do you have anything you want to share or say or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, I think like I said, with the longer format, we did cover quite a bit of the stuff that's in my mind and my heart right now because, you know, it's, I heard a great saying that I'll leave you maybe with this is that the, wealth is not a number. It's a set of transformations. The more transformations you can create, the wealthier you are. And I heard Tony Robbins say this 20 years ago. He said, money's great. And I thought back then, like, yeah, you're already rich, whatever. He said, when someone walks up to you and tells you you changed their life, it's a lot better than money. And today, after 1,000 people have told me that, I can tell you it's true. So what you're doing will fulfill you much more than the traditional societal chase for money. So,
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've always kind of like thought that that kind of pursuit of money, even though we're all stuck in it, is like a form of idolatry. Like I think it's like a way for us to forget about how much human connection is actually more valuable. Like
yes. All
that's
right,
a
my
beautiful
friend.
that's a beautiful place to wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. And you
Uh,
have a wonderful day. Stay warm up there.
I'll do my best. You guys stay out of the fires, man.
Oh, God. Yeah.
All right, take care. Much love.
Bye
Bye
bye.
now.